There exists a substance that transforms earth into empire, and empire into graveyard. The ancients sought the philosopher's stone, a mythical catalyst that could transmute lead into gold. They failed, of course. Alchemy is fantasy. But what they never anticipated was far more sinister, a substance that transmutes sovereignty into servitude. Black, viscous, buried beneath the feet of nations who believe they've been chosen by geology. This is not a story about oil. This is an archaeology of power, an excavation of the invisible scaffolding upon which modern nations are built and upon which they collapse. Because what the history books won't tell you is this: the moment a nation discovers treasure beneath its soil is the moment it begins to die. Not metaphorically, literally. Spain discovered this in the 16th century when Incan gold destroyed the Spanish Empire from within. Venezuela is discovering it now as its people flee a land floating on $24 trillion in petroleum reserves. Same affliction, different century. This is gold and governance, where wealth meets its dark side. Today, we chronicle what scholars euphemistically call the resource curse, a term so sterile it sanitizes the carnage. What we're actually examining is the pathology of easy wealth, the phenomenon where nations blessed by geology become cursed by economics. By the end of this chronicle, you'll understand why the discovery of oil is not a blessing, but a contagion, why the wealthiest ground produces the poorest citizens, and why the social contract, that ancient bond between ruler and ruled, dissolves the moment liquid gold flows from the earth. The thesis is historical, brutal, and repeating itself as we speak. Natural resource wealth doesn't build nations, it hollows them. Let us begin where all ruins begin, in gold. Madrid, 1519. The Spanish crown receives its first shipment from the New World. Not spices, not timber, not crops, gold. 15 tons of Aztec treasure melted from temple walls and ceremonial masks. The ships arrive in Seville harbor like a prophecy fulfilled. Spain, already a formidable monarchy, becomes something unprecedented, the wealthiest empire in human history. Within 50 years, Spain will control more precious metal than had existed in all of Europe since the fall of Rome. The flow is relentless. Potosí's silver mines employ 160,000 workers, essentially slaves, extracting wealth at a rate unimaginable to previous generations. The Spanish treasury overflows, and Spain decays. This is the original alchemy, the first transmutation. Because here's what happened beneath the surface, beneath the gilded cathedrals and the Armada fleets and the Habsburg grandeur. Spain stopped producing. Why cultivate wheat when you can import it with Peruvian silver? Why develop textile industries when Flemish merchants accept gold for finished cloth? Why educate engineers when you can simply hire German metallurgists to refine your stolen treasure? The Spanish economy became a hollow monument, magnificent on the exterior, rotting from within. This is the invisible scaffolding of extraction-based wealth. It creates the illusion of prosperity while destroying the foundation of productivity. Spain's agriculture atrophied, its industries withered, its universities produced theologians, not inventors. By 1557, barely 40 years into its golden age, Spain declared bankruptcy for the first time. It would default 6 more times over the next century. The Habsburgs had committed what would become the cardinal sin of resource economies. They confused revenue with wealth. Revenue is water flowing through a kingdom. Wealth is the irrigation system that captures and distributes it. Spain had infinite flow, zero infrastructure. When the mines eventually exhausted, When the flow reduced to a trickle, Spain discovered that it had built an empire on fiscal mirage. The gold had never been theirs. It had merely passed through their vaults on its way to Dutch bankers, Italian merchants, and German mercenaries. The Spanish treasury had become a pass-through entity. By 1650, the most resource-rich empire in human history was effectively bankrupt, its currency worthless, its people starving, its industries non-existent. The treasure had devoured the nation that possessed it. Now you might think this is ancient history, a cautionary tale with no modern equivalent. You would be catastrophically wrong. Because in the 20th century, nations around the globe discovered something far more valuable than gold beneath their soil, and the Spanish prophecy began to repeat, not in Toledo or Seville, but in Caracas, in Lagos, in Tehran. The substance changed, the alchemy remained. Let us speak plainly about what petroleum does to a nation. It is not merely a commodity. It is a pathogen that infects the relationship between state and citizen. To understand this, you must first understand the social contract, that invisible bond forged over centuries between the governed and those who govern. In a functioning state, the government requires its population. It must tax commerce, which means commerce must thrive, which means citizens must be educated, healthy, and productive. The state's survival is parasitically dependent on the population's success. This creates accountability. The ruler serves the ruled because the ruled generate the revenue. But resource wealth severs this ancient contract. When oil is discovered, the government no longer needs its people. It needs Exxon, it needs Shell, it needs foreign contracts and drilling concessions and export terminals. The citizens become economically irrelevant. This is the moment of transmutation, the instant when governance transforms from social compact to mineral extraction. The state stops asking, how do we develop our people? It starts asking, how do we secure the wells? Venezuela provides the clearest dissection of this pathology. Beneath Venezuelan soil lie 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the largest on Earth. In monetary terms, approximately $24 trillion. That's nearly the entire economic output of the United States for a year. And yet, Venezuela is now a hollowed state. Its hospitals operate without electricity. Its currency has experienced hyperinflation exceeding 1,000,000%. 7 million citizens, a quarter of the population, have fled. How does a nation floating on $24 trillion in resources produce refugees? Through the mechanism economists antiseptically call Dutch disease, a term that sanitizes the actual process: economic self-cannibalization. Here's the pathology. When oil exports flood an economy with foreign currency, the national currency appreciates. This makes every other domestic product uncompetitive. Why manufacture textiles when imports are cheaper? Why invest in agriculture when food can be purchased with petrodollars? Manufacturing dies, agriculture collapses, the entire productive economy atrophies around a single commodity, one revenue source, one point of failure. This is monoculture economics, and like agricultural monoculture, it creates catastrophic fragility. When oil prices collapse, and they always do, the entire state apparatus implodes overnight. But the disease goes deeper than economics, because oil wealth creates a perverse incentive structure that transforms governance into organized extraction. Consider the logic from the perspective of a political leader in a petroleum state. Your power doesn't derive from citizen taxes, it derives from controlling the oil ministry. Your survival doesn't depend on electoral legitimacy, it depends on military control of the wells. Your wealth doesn't come from economic growth,
It comes from signing bonuses paid by foreign companies for drilling rights. So what do? You centralize, you militarize, you ensure every barrel extracted flows through institutions you personally control. This is not corruption in the traditional sense. It's something more systemic, the architecture of power realigning itself around geological accident. Nigeria's state petroleum company has lost, not stolen, lost approximately $50 billion over 2 decades. Angola's former president ruled for 38 years while his daughter accumulated over $2 billion through state oil contracts. The pattern repeats across continents: Equatorial Guinea, Kazakhstan, Libya, Azerbaijan. Different languages, same structural pathology. But here's the archaeology that most analyses miss. The foreign oil corporations are not exploiters. They are co-architects. They prefer autocrats. Dictatorships don't renegotiate contracts. They don't demand environmental protections or labor standards. They don't redirect revenues towards schools and hospitals. They simply sign and deposit. This creates a circular system of extraction. Oil companies extract resources. Autocrats extract signing bonuses. International banks extract fees for laundering the proceeds. The IMF extracts austerity when the nation inevitably defaults. And the citizen? The citizen extracts only irrelevance from the wealthiest ground on earth. Let us demolish the comforting myth now. These nations are poor because of corruption. Wrong. These nations are corrupt because they are resource-rich. The causality runs in reverse. Dozens of academic studies confirm this archaeological truth. Nations with abundant natural resources demonstrate measurably higher corruption, weaker institutions, and lower democratic accountability than resource-poor nations at similar development levels. Botswana is the exception that proves the rule. It managed diamond wealth through transparent institutions that existed before the diamonds were discovered. Everywhere else, the sequence reversed. Resources came first, institutions never followed. The pathogen activated. What happens when the alchemy completes its transformation? When the gold turns to ash? We don't need prophecy. We have autopsy reports written in abandoned capitals. Libya. Muammar Gaddafi controlled Africa's largest oil reserves for 42 years. He built a totalitarian state funded entirely by petroleum revenues. No taxation, no accountability, no institutions beyond his personal security apparatus. When oil prices dropped and Arab Spring protests erupted in 2011, the entire state structure collapsed within 8 months, not because it was attacked, but because it had never actually existed. There was only one man and oil money. When the money faltered, the mirage dissolved. Libya remains a failed state. Multiple governments, endless civil war, the oil still flows, the people still starve. This is the terminal stage of the pathology, institutional hollowing. Because resource wealth allows states to build the appearance of governance without the substance. They can fund security forces without civil service, construct palaces without infrastructure, maintain military power without economic productivity. The facade is magnificent. The foundation is non-existent. Now let us speak about who pays for the illusion. Not the political elite who signed the extraction contracts. Their wealth was already offshore, denominated in dollars, secured in Dubai real estate and Swiss bank accounts. Not the foreign oil corporations. They've already extracted their profits and diversified their portfolios. Not the international banks. They've collected their fees for facilitating capital flight. The citizen pays through hyperinflation, through the collapse of subsidies, through austerity programs imposed by the IMF as a condition of debt restructuring. This is the cruel mathematics of the resource curse. The population is told they are co-owners of national wealth. In reality, they are co-signers on national debt. When oil prices are high, governments subsidize fuel and food to maintain social peace. These subsidies create the fiscal illusion of wealth distribution, but they're funded by sovereign bonds, debt issued against future oil revenue. When prices crash, the subsidies evaporate. The debt remains. The resource curse reveals something disturbing about the architecture of modern power. We have built global systems that reward extraction over creation. A nation that manufactures microchips creates sustainable wealth. The value is generated by human capital, education, innovation, institutional knowledge. But a nation that drills oil, it generates revenue without transformation, income without investment. And the global financial system prefers this model because extraction is predictable. You can securitize it. You can build derivative markets around commodity futures. You can collateralize reserves that haven't even been pumped yet. Human capital, education, innovation, those are messy, unpredictable, slow. So capital flows toward extractive regimes, not productive ones. The bitter irony is this: as we transition away from fossil fuels, the curse is metastasizing. Cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo, essential for electric vehicle batteries, controlled by warlords and Chinese mining contracts. The Congolese see none of the green energy wealth. Lithium in Bolivia, already foreign interference and political coups circle the salt flats. The substance changes, the alchemy remains. Because the resource curse was never about petroleum, it was always about a single question that haunts every empire built on extraction. Can a nation's wealth exist separate from its people's prosperity? History answers clearly, yes. And that separation is not a bug, it's the architecture. This is gold and governance. We excavate the invisible scaffolding of power, the mechanisms hidden beneath currencies and contracts, the alchemy that transmutes sovereignty into servitude. If you want to understand not just what happened, but why it was always going to happen, subscribe. Because the past is not behind us, it's beneath us, in the soil, in the wells, in the ore, waiting to be discovered again.